Hello, welcome frequent flyers to today's episode of The Lounge. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Sheryl Barden with me, and we are talking about Joie de Vivre. I'm probably mispronounced that. I'm not French. I'm sorry, my French friends, but it stands for the joy of living. And that is really the most basic definition we can give this extremely nuanced phrase, which is very beautiful and has a lot of meaning to it. And when we look at this word, it's something that we sometimes experience but don't often express. And so that's why Sheryl and I chose this topic for today. Sheryl is a certified aviation manager and president and CEO of Aviation Personnel International, an aviation industry recruitment and talent identification veteran. Sheryl is a frequent guest speaker, blogger, and writer for the monthly AINsight through leadership column for Aviation International News. Today, we're going to be talking about aviation employment issues, including the talent shortage and pilot professionalism, the importance of having this essence of joy of living in our life, and opportunities for females in male-dominated industries. Sheryl is really regarded for her extensive background in employee search and coaching to fulfill aviation recruiting and human resource consulting needs, and an active member in Women in Aviation International and many other organizations. Sheryl, it is a pleasure to have you here with me today.
Sarah, it is so great to be here with you, and thank you so much for inviting me today. I've been looking forward to it. It'll be fun.
Yes, it's definitely going to be fun. And one of the things that I forgot to mention in the intro was how you are a fan of golf, travel, and Mardi Gras. You're originally from New Orleans and you love living life to the fullest, which includes experiencing good food, good wine, and fashion. Can you tell me a little bit more about your origin story? How did you find yourself in aviation? What brought you from New Orleans to where you are today?
Oh, Sarah, that's a lot of complicated things, and then I'll start with some easy stuff as well. So, yeah, I grew up in New Orleans, and it was a fantastic place to grow up. I love it. I think it has put some significant imprints on me that I've carried through my entire life, and I will continue to. One of them, I'll tell you. My mom used to say, "Oh, we're from New Orleans, and we believe in the two-party system." And she said, "You know what that is, don't you?" And it's that one party a week is not enough. And I kind of probably have taken that with me because I love people, and I love to have people to entertain and have people gathered together or gathered around the table. And so that's kind of that piece. But I grew up in New Orleans. I went away to school in Pennsylvania after I was in Louisiana for 2 years. And so my mom started our company. And I was in second grade when she went back to work, and she had been in the aviation search business out of Teterboro way prior to when I was born. So just to set the stage on that was she started in the aviation industry in the early 1950s.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was the industry was really just starting, and she was in pilot a company called Pilots Employment Associates. So that was not just business aviation, because business aviation was just starting, and it had a lot to do with the airline. So, my mom starts this company. I'm in second grade. I have responsibilities. I had responsibilities to get the mail out of the post office box every day after school, and to empty the trash bins in the office every day. So that's how I started. And I went to school with every intention of coming back home and being in my parents' company, my mom's company, I should say. So I really realized that I needed to get a little further afield from where I grew up in order to kind of expand my horizon if I was coming right back to New Orleans. I felt like everybody thought that the world rotated on an axis that went right through Bourbon Street, and I knew that the world was bigger than that. So I made this plan. I said, I got to go to some place where I want to go to a big campus. so I ended up at Penn State, and I graduated from Penn State, and January of my senior year, I thought, oh my God, I can't go home and work for my parents. They will two things. One, they're going to control everything, like where I live, how much I make, all of those things. And secondly, will I ever know if I was able to succeed on my own? So I hustled. I came home and told my mom went to sleep, and I told my dad that I wasn't coming home. And he said, I told your mother you were never going to come home. And she said, oh, yes, you will. So I said, okay, well, we got some work to do. So then I went out and did campus recruiting and was able to get a job. And I went to work on Park Avenue in New York for a forest products, paper, and chemical company. And I spent a 17-year career in a very different industry. Again, a pretty male-dominated industry, and an industry that didn't have, I would say, it didn't have as much creativity to it that I really thrived on. And so from that, I moved 3 times from New York. I went to Wilmington, Delaware, and then Richmond, Virginia, and then I ended up out in San Francisco, all working for the same company. I did switch companies while I was out here, and then but I always remained close to API. I always remained somewhat in the business. Doing interviews of candidates. I interview candidates, and interview people for our company. And then after my son was born, I determined it was time to really come back. I always knew I wanted to come back. It was like, when is the right time? And if I had a do-over, I would have come back a couple years before that.
Okay.
I was in grad school, and I was in an executive MBA, and it would have been really smart to have come back right at that time. But I didn't. So, yeah.
Hindsight is 2020.
Hindsight is always 2020, isn't it, Sarah?
Yes.
So that's kind of how I got here. And I then moved into working for our company. My start date was August 3rd, 2001. So if you think about that, what happened a month and 8 days, a month and a week later was 9/11. And so that really threw the industry in a loop. But I worked through it, and it's been very interesting to be the second generation and build upon what someone else started.
Absolutely. And I'm sure through that time frame as well, not only did you work through and experience 9/11 in a way that not many would have, right, unless they were in the aviation industry. You did this as newly coming back online into the industry full time. And then fast forward, 20 years, and we had COVID.
Right.
So you've seen that. So when we talk about aviation employment issues, including the talent shortage, this has actually been an issue for a long time. COVID, I think, exacerbated not only pilots, but we have mechanic shortages. We have logistic shortages. We have just professionals in general that want to be in this field. What can you tell me about this past 20 years, what you've seen? Has there been cycles? Is there a pattern? What would you say has been the kind of flavor over that time period?
Great question, Sarah. And you talked about 9/11 and COVID, but in between that, we also had a very, very pivotal time, and that was the day that the 3 automakers went to Congress asking for some bailouts because of the economic crisis.
Yes, 2000.
And they were asked a question: how did they get there? And they didn't. No one had coached them how to properly answer that question, and it put business aviation, into a real tailspin, I would say. And so we've had this cycle of we went from 9/11 and built up. And then we went to the shaming of business aviation. And during that period of time, so many flight departments either closed or downsized. And API had a very active role in that, in helping those organizations, helping all of those displaced employees through our outplacement program. And then, of course, we had COVID, which we immediately thought was going to send us into another tailspin. And instead, it did just the opposite. It absolutely fueled our industry in a very good way. In some ways, maybe a little bit too much, because we had people buying airplanes and perhaps not being prepared to buy them, or realizing exactly what they needed to do when they bought them, or buying airplanes that were maybe a little bit substandard, and so that we're balancing some of that out. But the pilot shortage is it's very, very interesting, and I firmly believe I was challenged at one time to write something for one of my clients. Had said, I need something to give my boss, and so I wrote this white paper kind of on the pilot shortage and how did we get here, and that was pretty pivotal for me, because it really put me now. We published it, and that, I think, is really maybe where I started with a newsletter and some of the writing that I've done about our industry. But there had always been predicted that there was going to be a pilot shortage, and every time we thought there was, like as we were coming into 9/11, in 2001, the airlines were really bearing down and hiring more pilots, and then everything went awry when the American public and the international world stopped flying because of fear. So I think it starts back at 2000, in 2001, and I started talking about it. I think the first there was an NBAA when it was Hurricane Sandy, and I want to say that was 2014. Might have been a little bit before that, where I did my first panel talk, my first talk on the pending pilot shortage. And I had people in the audience stand up and heckle me.
Wow.
Tell me that I was whatever kind of a crazy woman, that it's never going to happen. We've always said it's going to happen. It's never going to happen. I said, I understand, but hang on tight, because it's going to come. And when it hits, it's going to be like a freight train. But so many things kept delaying it, including the rise of the mandatory retirement age from 60 to 65. At a time, we still had a significant number of pilots still on furlough from 9/11 and from the economic downturn. So I think it really did start to come on in about 17, which was about 2 years, a year and a half or so after we started retiring pilots again. But that, I don't know if I answered your question, but that takes us around to how we got there. And we are now, I love the fact that I think it was Fortune did a survey this year, as they do every year, about what are the hottest, best jobs.
Right.
For the first time in years, pilot was at the top of the list.
I saw that.
But for so many years, pilot wasn't at the top of the list because it took so long to get to a place where you had any sort of a return on your investment, unless you had that investment made by the military.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think being based in Asia for so long as well, 2017 is when I started to see a lot of white papers and graphs and data showing the coming pilot shortage. And because of it not being in the top sought out careers, many people were not going to school for it, weren't training. And so we could see it from that aspect, but everyone else was kind of like, no, everything's fine. We've got what we need, but not accurately forecasting what would take place. And then obviously COVID changed the game again. And I know one of the things you mentioned was pilot professionalism. Now, what have you seen because of these extreme scenarios that have brought us like built up and then pendulum swing back the other way? What have you seen in terms of pilot behavior over that course of time as well?
Wow, that's a great question because, when I think about pilot behavior, I go back to 2000, well, the furlough, the big furlough in 2001 after 9/11, and what happened to those people. Many of those pilots left being pilots.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened in 2009. They left being pilots, and now many of them have been called back, and I think some have gone back to being pilots after not being pilots for years and years. I think what we saw in business aviation and what I've seen up until probably just recently has been a deepening of professionalism of pilots. And I would say not just pilots, but all people in business aviation flight departments, a real deepening of professionalism for a number of reasons. One, it's become a more integral, in the 22 years that I've been working full time in this industry, it's become from being, maybe I've had people call it, the chairman's perk or our dirty little secret that we don't ever want anybody to know that we have a flight department, to an integral business tool. Yes. And flight departments have become much more of a strategic business unit. And what I've seen in that is all of our professionals really becoming true corporate business people that specialize in flying a plane or maintaining a plane or scheduling a plane or providing cabin safety on a plane. So I've seen that professionalism really expand. What I see happening now, though, is that we have such a shortage that our airlines are believing, the airlines believe they'll get us out of the shortage by throwing more money at it. And certainly, why is pilot a great career now? Because you can see very quickly that you can make $400,000 and $500,000 as a pilot and really not work that much. It takes a long time. It takes a while to get there, though. It's not when you come right out of training. But I think that has really, all of that has really put our professionalism perhaps in somewhat of a spin. And I keep always saying, well, when is enough enough? When do we say, I love my job?
Yeah.
I'm being paid well. Sure, I could go make money somewhere else, but is it, what is it? At what cost? And if we look at it, this industry there's always been cycles. And it's not just this industry, every industry has cycles. We have cycles when we have downturns in the economy. And, I think this frenzy around increased compensation, I feel is challenging not only the value proposition, but is it challenging our professionalism?
I love that, because it's an important question to ask ourselves as leaders in the industry, as the ones making those hiring decisions, and also the ones accepting placements. I know I was speaking with one of your colleagues, Jennifer, that we spoke about earlier, and she was saying that a large part of the coaching that API does is to help the flight crew make sure that they're taking positions that align with their values and that the schedule will be in alignment with how they want their lifestyle to look. And a lot of times people don't look at that factor. They look at the bottom line of, oh, I'll be earning X per year.
Mm-hmm.
But how much overtime will that require of you? How much time will you be on the road? Excuse me. What are some of the other factors that go into that? And is that worth your time and your energy? And I think people forget that those two things are also a resource and a form of compensation.
Mhm.
So I think that segues nicely into the topic of our session today, Joie de Vivre. Can you pronounce that for me?
Joie de Vivre. Joie
Huh?
de Vivre.
Yeah, okay. I
Joy of
can't, in my mind, I can say it perfectly, but then when I go to say it, it doesn't come out that great. When we're looking for a new job, when we're looking to hire somebody, when we're just looking, do we want to go to this event? Do I want to say yes to this commitment, for this volunteer role? How can that concept, how do you bring that concept into your decision making and into your lifestyle choices?
How do I personally?
Yeah, just so,
Okay,
so
or
that
for
others can
yeah.
understand how they can apply it in their own lives as well.
Well, I think you have to break all of those pieces down and say, what do I value? So I value money, and why do I value money? And not just that I could make 30% more, but what does that 30% mean? Does it mean that I'm going to have a bigger house? And is that bigger house important? Or, how important is a bigger house? Does it mean that I'm going to be able to put more money away for my kids' college? And is that it? What are your, I would say, really look at what are your drivers? What are the things you value? So around money,
Mm,
around your lifestyle and where you live. Does this job require you to move? Does this job require you um, to have a larger commute to your office?
right.
Is the kind of flying, or the kind, this is not just for an aviation job, for any job, is the kind of work that you want to be doing. Because if you don't want to be flying overseas, but this has a lot of international work, then are you going to be unhappy? And we all know what happens when we're unhappy. We start to complain, we start to grouse. And
Mm,
then, we then might be bringing negative energy to an organization. So do you want to be the person bringing that negative energy? You want to have, if it were me, I'd be wanting to say, I want to show up with as much positive energy as I possibly can. Now, we all know that that is not sustainable 24/7, 365. We all have times when we go through, peaks and valleys, ebbs and flows of everything working really well.
yeah.
But if if your ebbs, you know, if your ebbs are short, and work through them, but you want to look at how can you be the most fulfilled as the whole person, as the whole authentic person. And that's not, unless you're single, that's just not just about you.
Right.
It's about your partner. It's about, do you have, is it your children, whatever. And those are also important factors.
Absolutely. And I think what you mentioned there, being fulfilled as a whole person, is the key here, because that concept, if you're working to the bone and you have no spare time and all you have is to go to sleep at night and then rinse and repeat, what about your physical fitness, time with your family, time with your pets, out in nature, reading a book, like all of these other things that can bring you that joy, making sure that and you understand what are those non-negotiables, so that when you do show up to work or to date night or to your kids sports game or dance recital, whatever it is, you can be fully present and you can show up with positive energy rather than like, oh, I have to run back to the office, or this is BS, this is a waste of my time. Making sure that you treat your time as sacredly as you treat the value that you have for money. And I think that's a really important concept when it comes to making the right career choices, but also the right hiring choices.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Okay. So, with all of your experience the last 20 something years in this industry and your prior experience in New York, what would you say your superpower is?
So, Sarah, I have to say that's such a hard concept for me because when I think about, I even went to look up like what does it mean to have a superpower?
Yeah.
I don't have a superpower, but I do have. But I thought long and hard about. Years ago, I was in an entrepreneurial training program, and it was called Dan Sullivan, the Strategic Coach. And his whole thing was, what is your unique ability? So I have a unique ability. It's not super. It's just something that I do and I do well and I love doing it and it lights me up. It gives me joie de vivre every time I do it. And I think my unique ability is helping people see their potential probably more vividly and more completely and maybe even a little bit broader than they see in themselves. And so that's kind of where when I think of my unique ability and whatever superpower, it's really that. And that is what brings me great joy in trying to help other people see and act on their potential. And in the work I do, that's what I do.
Yeah, you get to do that every day. And that's awesome. I also really appreciate the reframe of unique ability because I have had other guests get tripped up by that question. And it's often because we in society are taught, downplay the kind of big accomplishments. We don't want to brag. We don't want to show off too much. And so that's just conditioning we have around that term. And we typically think of movies like The Avengers, right? And
I thought about Superwoman, in her red, white, and blue spangle. I'm like, I don't have anything that's super. I'm just a regular person, but I have something that I do well and I love doing.
And that in itself is super. And so acknowledging that for everyone else who's listening, if you struggle with this concept, think about what it is that you do really well and that you love to do, things that seem effortless. The time just goes by. And that's where you're in your element. That's your unique ability, your superpower, and start to embrace that, start to acknowledge that about yourself and celebrate it because it's definitely something worth celebrating.
Exactly.
So Sheryl, also, we talked a little bit about being a female in this industry from the 50s, your mother starting this company and this business, and then your career, going through, what are the opportunities you see as a female leader in this male-dominated industry? And have you seen some recent shifts?
Well, I think opportunities for women, I hope, are limitless. I think, whether it's this industry, I go back to, Sarah, it makes me think about companies with boards that have women on their boards. And then I'll put in a plug for aviation as well, because companies that have airplanes do better than those that don't. Mm-hmm. We have statistics on that. And same with companies with women on their boards. And I think that bodes for every organization. I think there are things that women do uniquely well. I have our company, API, we're small, but we are an all-women company. And I think that's because we are unique. Our manner of doing things is very comfortable for others, and especially in our world, for men to be able to open up and share and show their authentic self. That I think for us that we're able to bridge that very well and open that opportunity as women. I see a lot of opportunity for women. I would like to see more female pilots.
Yes.
Yeah. I certainly would like to. I'm embarrassed that our industry, our diversity numbers are no better today than they were 20 or 30 years ago.
And that's shocking, isn't it?
It is shocking.
Very shocking.
I'm hoping that now that pilot is at the top of the list, that we'll see more women.
I hope so too. My younger sister just became a pilot several years ago, and she's been accepted to the United Aviate program. So she's very excited. And she went to school for something completely different and then followed this passion of hers, this joy that she had. And I think that's something, as you had a 17-year career, then you change into aviation. So it's not too late for those of you who are thinking, I already went to school, I got a master's, a graduate. It doesn't matter. Many people over the course of their lives have a decade-long or 2-decade-long stints in different industries. And, you're applying your experience in unique and new ways every time you make that shift, that pivot, if you will.
Yep.
But it's not starting over. And so
No.
I think the opportunities are limitless, no matter whether you're male or female. We all bring great things to the table, and we need that balance of energy in order to get things through, right? We need structure and logic and linear thinking, and we also need creativity and connection and empathy. And both men and women have both of those things in different, every person's very unique and different. But it's important that we continue, talking about this to young girls and to women and people, letting them know that there is more to aviation than just being a pilot, and that there are so many things that they can do within their, they might start out as a pilot and end up, as CEO of another company.
Yeah, and I'm not a pilot, never have been. Yeah, there's another do-over, Sarah. If I could have another do-over, I would have at least learned to fly.
Well, it's not too late.
So people say that, and I say, oh, yes, it is. At where I am and what I know about myself, I don't have the time or the focus to put towards it. I wouldn't be focused enough.
And that's okay.
One thing I know is that being a pilot is not a recreational sport.
Right.
Being a pilot is serious business.
Yes.
And I don't have the dedication and the focus that I would need to do it. So it is too late.
And that's okay, because acknowledging that too is very important, because it's sometimes we have these goals and we want to reach them. But when we can acknowledge and accept that we're not willing to, at this season of our life, this phase that we're in, whatever it is, go in that direction, because of the dedication and focus and time it takes, and we accept that means we can let it go and create that space for something else. So I think that's really beautiful.
So I just find friends who have planes.
Exactly. What a wonderful solution.
You bet.
Amazing. Okay, so I know that you have to run and catch a flight. Very, very aviation of you after this interview. But before we wrap up, I just want to ask one more question of you. I always like to ask my guests, who's on their personal board of directors? Is there a figure or someone that has been really instrumental over the course of your career that, whether you speak to them or not, but you kind of check in with that mental perspective, what would this person do? Have you had anything like that in your life?
Oh, Sarah, I am so blessed to have such a wide range of people like that, not just one. If I could make, and I'll get a little teary, but if I could make one phone call to that board, it would be to my mom, and she's been gone. So now I'm getting teary. But she was a great source. My mom and my dad, who has been gone more than half my life, but I would say they would have been. But I have people I turn to for multiple different things. I have people I turn to when I need a sounding board. I have people I turn to when I need energy. I have people I turn to when I need brainstorming. I have people I turn to when I just need girlfriend kind of stuff. I have people, so first I got to start with my team. I have such a wonderful team, and they're all part of my board because we're all in it together. And, you mentioned Jennifer, but there's Debbie, there's Lisa, my fantastic team. I have a team of other consultants that I work with on a regular basis, and love them. But it's great to have those resources, and resources that you use for one thing or resources that you use for something else. And then I've had just some great influences, and I'll give a shout out. I do this every time, but I can't not shout out to her, is the amazing Joan Sullivan Garrett, who started MedAir. And she was a friend of my mom's, and she became a friend of mine. And she challenged me. She challenged me in some tough, and gave me some tough love when I needed it, about my not showing up and taking the platform. And I am eternally grateful to her for shining that light, and not only saying, you need, why aren't you doing it, but you need to do it, and you have all the strength to do it. And I think she helped me really start on being more of what I've developed into today, which is, kind of a voice in our industry. And I've also had a wonderful PR person in Jill Henning, and writer, who has helped me as well to develop that voice. So I got lots of people I turn to, lots of people. I'm blessed.
Thank you so much for sharing. And Sheryl, where can people find you if they would like to connect with you more or learn more about API?
Well, our website is at apiaviation.com, but we have, so first of all, if you link in with me, I'm going to probably link in with you. I love people. I'm curious. I'm inherently curious about people, as you know. I would often reach out. I have API has a fantastic or I shouldn't say fantastic, because now I'm talking about, but we have a newsletter that comes out every month that has a high level of engagement to it. It might be some place where you'd like to connect with us through our newsletter. But it's through our website, also our social media. We have a API Facebook page and LinkedIn page, et cetera, where we stay connected.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Sheryl, so much for being with me today. This has been so much fun, and I hope you have a smooth travel to your next destination, and we will see you soon.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's really been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed the opportunity to get to know you during this process. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.